Yotam, welcome. I don't even know where to begin this. When I read through the notes, I have to not start with food, really, because your background is so quite incredible. So, well, you just said so many things. So, growing up, talk us through childhood.
So I grew up in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is an incredible city in the sense that, I mean, there's all that history. It's probably one of the most famous places in the world. People have a set of connotations, associations. It's just that, it's like everything you think, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all coming together with this kind of intensity. And this intensity is really like, that's how the city is like, like there's... Are you aware of that as a kid? Or is it almost something that, as you become an adult and your world changes? You're totally aware. You go to the old city you got the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, and they all live side by side. But there's obviously, as we know, unfortunately, a lot of tension going on. You're totally aware of that. But all the religious symbols. In food as well, we're talking about food. I've always tend to talk about food, but you go to the old city, and you've got, in the Muslim quarter, you've got these incredible hummus places which are like establishments. You go and sit down, and people think, like, now we talk about hummus, it's like something comes out of the tub. It's like coleslaw, right? This is just not what it is in the real world. It's not a spread. It's not a base for that you put salami on. It's a meal. It's prepared freshly, and you serve it with egg and with onion, with pita, and it comes kind of warmish, and it's a ceremony. And you go and you realize, like, you're in the presence of something super delicious that has taken a long time to prepare. And so the food cultures are also really, really present. So that's East Jerusalem. In West Jerusalem, you got the equivalent in the Jewish part, which is the big fruit and vegetable markets and the big restaurants that go with them, often like these kind of eateries where really fresh stuff that comes just straight from the market is presented to you. So it was intense. It was intense in so many ways. In food-wise, religious, politics, it's all kind of thrown in the mix, and it's never dull.
And your parents, so what did they do?
My parents were, my dad was a professor, my mom was a teacher, so we were in an academic household, and I kind of always expected to end up going to university and doing something academic. It was just like, never really questioned that, because that's the life I lived at home and our surroundings. And I did go to university. I went to university.
Yeah, and did proper grown-up stuff. I went to university and did fashion and textile design. I did something creative, but you did a grown-up degree.
Yeah, I did a master's in philosophy and literature, and I did that. I loved it because in some ways I learned a lot about lots of things that are really still relevant to me today, like, thinking about the world, how we operate and what's beautiful, what's not, like big questions. But I did have a good time at university, and I was good at it, but I was also always feeling like my world, it's quite a niche world, people ask me, so why did you not stay in academia? Why did you not become a teacher or a professor? I said, because, I felt like I'm talking to three people, all these discussions are very limiting, you're a professor and maybe one of your colleagues would be interested in what you've just written or researched, but actually the implications for the rest of the world, especially in the humanities, are very minor. And then I also knew that on the other hand, I had to, people came over for a dinner party or some friends over for a snack, and I would impress them with something that I've just bought in the market and cooked.
How old were you when you started cooking?
I started cooking when I went to university. Cooking seriously. I used to watch my parents cook, and I was interested in that, but I never thought about it as something that I'm good at until I went to university. And like so many other people that leave home, they go like, who cooks for me? Who's what's going on here? Where's the food coming from? So I started.
So when you were at home, who cooked? Mum and dad or just mum?
They were both good cooks.
Because it's interesting, because many times when we do grilling, we hear that an awful lot, and I was the same. Both my parents cooked, and it almost feels that because you're surrounded by food, and you've said the same thing that so many people say as well, it's something I never thought I was good at, almost that exposure to food from an early age, it just becomes part of you.
Yeah, that's right. I think in households where people are interested in food, cooking, eating, etc., it's by osmosis. We all eat all the time, so you can't choose not to be part of that. If your parents take you to restaurants, or if they cook really good food at home, and if they're curious, and both my parents are curious and just love food, you are infected by this thing, and then you carry it on with you, wherever you go. So although I didn't think about it as a career option at that early stage, I thought, okay, well, I can do this because I know what good food is. So if I go and I learn a little bit how to cook, then it's that freedom to be able to cater for yourself. It's an incredible sense of freedom.
Do you think you could always taste? I'm always a big believer that people who cook almost have always had quite an ability to taste things from a young age.
Yes, but I don't think in the environment that I grew up in, I don't think that was so unique. So in the sense, Jerusalem, going back to my childhood, was this incredible place. I hate the word melting pot, because melting pot means that everything turns into one, but actually we had these kind of cultures living side by side, influencing each other, but never kind of melding into one thing. So, you'd have Palestinian food culture, which is incredible. People know that food from maybe being exposed to it here through particular dishes, falafel and hummus, but it's so much more complex than that. There is this kind of incredible rice and bulgur dishes. There is the slow cooking, the use of yogurt, lentils, a lot of really interesting stuff that happens in different versions of Palestinian cooking and Palestinian cuisines. And then you had foods of Jewish diaspora, immigrants that have recently come from Europe, North Africa, Middle East, all those parts of the world. And I remember going on a Friday afternoon there was this kind of these restaurants by the outskirts of the market, of the fruit and vegetable market, and there were like Kurdish Jews that came from Iraq, like the Kurdistan part of cooking these soups that were had this kibbeh or kubbeh, which were made out of semolina and stuffed with meat, and then outside you have like a beetroot soup or lemony kind of soup, and the whole thing, you go on a Friday and you go this soup is just so precious. It's just a soup, but so much work and love has gone into it. And then there's the historical story of the community that made it. So in some way you can't be picky because there's just so much to choose from, each community with its own food. And I think I was blessed by being exposed to all these cuisines.
It's funny because it does make me jealous. One, because you're your description and you're an amazing writer as well is always good. And I sort of think when I was growing up, then something that was exciting was getting a piece of black pudding. And you describe...
Which I also love.
And you describe all these kind of variations of flavours. So it's almost not a surprise that whole world was integrated into you. So academia, what was the plan then? When you were at university and you were doing your masters, what did you think you were going to do?
So in some senses, I thought, I might just be there. I'll stay and be a teacher or university. I didn't really think of the end game. I just thought okay, I'll do this. I'll do my degree. If it was up to my dad, I would go and learn sciences, because he was a chemistry professor of chemistry. So I think he would have preferred me to go and do something a bit more tangible, than just humanities. But I really enjoy what I did. But in some ways he adjusted his expectations to, okay, so at least you'll be in this field, but you'll be in university. But then I tell him one day that I actually am going to completely neglect what I was doing, leave behind what I was doing for the last 3 or 4 years and start something completely new, which was cooking. I nearly gave him a heart attack. It was okay, you're not going to be a scientist, you're going to be you're going to be in the philosophy department or whatever, but now you're even throwing that away and you're going to go and do cooking. And for him, and bless him, he's not alive anymore, but he was such a gentle man, but he was really worried about me. And we both have kids.
Yeah.
The feeling when you think your child makes the wrong choice, but you don't know what to do about it. I felt that the same about my dad. It was are you sure you want to be a cook? Are you, because for him it was really a kind of dangerous territory. How are you going to make a living? Is this respectable enough?
What did you have siblings-wise?
Sorry?
What did you have siblings-wise, brothers and sisters?
I had a brother, unfortunately he passed away.
Yeah.
And I had an older sister, and she was already at university studying economics. so she was okay. You know, so that was all right. But
so how old are you then? So the day comes when you decide, right? You know what? I'm not going to do this. Academia isn't for me. I'm going to change.
So I was in my mid to late, I think I was 26 or 27.
Okay.
I spent time in university and working as well. I worked in journalism for a bit, and I was kind of, I was on that path. And then I just thought, this was when I came to London. So I started doing these kind of like home cooking, like educating myself, like cooking a bit more sophisticated stuff and getting like books and about French cooking and learning the formal terms for what I was doing, you know, how to make a sauce and the cuts, etc. But then I came to London. This was 1997.
Okay, so how come you came to London?
Just life brought me to London. My partner wanted to do a business degree, and I thought, okay, and we were living in Amsterdam for a couple of years, not really doing that much. And
it's really funny when people tell their story, whenever we do this, and I think we're all guilty of it as human beings, that we jump and you forget the little bits, right? So how did you end up in Amsterdam, right? I want the full picture here. I don't want the abridged version.
I have nothing to hide. So when I moved so I was still at university, but I had a friend in Amsterdam, and we thought like, okay, my partner at the time and I, we said we want to just like go somewhere fun. And he finished his degree. I was going to finish mine, and we said Amsterdam is a fun city. We're going to go to Amsterdam, and we arrived one day. We had I got a job, like the weirdest job. I got a job, 2 jobs actually. One of them was I worked at night in a hotel, a sleazy hotel by the train station in Amsterdam. I was serving beers to sex workers. You know, I'm not getting it.
This is why you need the full version. I knew there was going to be more to this story.
I'm not kidding you. So I didn't speak Dutch. I had to get a job, and a friend of mine worked at that hotel at night. He said like they need like people just, you know, to man the reception at this hotel. And we're really near the main train station in Amsterdam. I said, okay, I'll take that job. And literally my shift started like at 11 o'clock and I finished at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, people, you know, some stoned kids came and got their rooms. I gave them the keys, and then like 6 workers came. I served them beer because there was a beer tap there, and that was what I did at night. Like, and then in the morning, this was so disgusting. That's a food-related story, but not like one you want to tell. I had to go and prepare the breakfast. So I had to go and get like this awful ham and cheese slice on the machines, and then on the meat slicer, get the awful like cardboard bread ready and the jam in the little pouches and put that on the table. It was the most disgusting thing because you smelled of cigarette and beers, and then you had to go and make that like breakfast. So I spent time at that hotel hating my job.
How long did you do that for?
For about a year. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Because I always feel every time I see you are, you know, you're a very cerebral human being. I can't imagine you doing that because you're very particular.
So this was one job I did. I did that about 4 nights a week. And another job I did, I went to the Jewish community as a good Jewish boy. I said, do you have a job? Like, so there was a newspaper, a magazine that for the Jewish community, and I had my background in journalism, so the editor gave me a job as like writing little pieces and like editing, doing a bit of edit jobs that I could do with my English and Hebrew, and so I worked there. So I wasn't completely in a kind of a desert of hotel receptions, but it was a funny moment. But I'm not even telling you that what I should have told you is I went out a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, I went out almost like twice a week, like serious, like clubbing. So that was also part of what I did. So this is why I call it the desert years. You know, I was kind of like.
So your dad, as an academic, as someone who clearly sort of worried about you, how did he react to that move from academia to Amsterdam to, or did he not know one part of your job?
I don't think he knew what was going on in Amsterdam the whole time. You know, I was still working on my master's dissertation. I was doing it by correspondence. You know, I was still working, which I did. But yeah, he didn't know everything that was going on. Like, you don't tell your parents what you do when you're 25, do you?
No. I don't tell my parents now, and I'm 59.
Yeah, well, there you go.
All right, so after Amsterdam, so then 2 years in Amsterdam.
So 2 years in Amsterdam, the desert years, and then I came to London, and I thought like, okay, so I finished my university degree, and now I did enjoy cooking, and even in Amsterdam, I started learning cooking a bit more seriously, and I came to London, and my partner was doing a master's in business, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go and do I'll take a couple of courses. So I went to the Cordon Bleu, and I signed up for a couple of basic courses, and I essentially thought, like, I'm going to get some formal training here because to see if I want to do it. I didn't really commit. I didn't think, okay, that's my next career. I just thought, like, let's see how good I am at this and whether I like this or not. And to be honest, I really enjoyed the training. I loved the kind of the methodological, like, kind of French way, you know, these are the cuts, these are the sauces, this is the stock, and this is how you make. I love this because I'm a cerebral person. Yeah. I love to understand how things work and get proper training and understand, etc. So I did this during the day, and then in the evening I went to get like proper like work experience. So I went to the Capital restaurant in Knightsbridge. They had a Michelin star, and I thought, like, I need to get my Michelin star training. And I just worked for free after school, like in the evenings. But I had zero experience. So the chef told me, go and work with the pastry chef. And she was a really nice woman, and she really taught me a lot about patisserie and pastry, which was my first, how I landed in the kitchen. So I learned how to make.
How did you find that first experience of being in a professional kitchen for the first time?
It was really bloody hard. It was really, really hard. First of all, I was an oddball. I was older. So I had zero experience, and I was 26 or 27. You know, that is not a good place to be in a kitchen when you just start. Normally, with that level of experience, you're like 16 and robust. I was like 27 and like I've done stuff. So I was different. And it was just really, really long hours. It was like incredibly hard work. I was like, you know, I think I arrived like at 8 o'clock in the morning, and often I didn't leave until like 11 o'clock at night. And it was really tough. And I think I aimed really hard, like a Michelin star. You don't need to start. And now people ask me, oh, what is your piece of advice for? I get, don't start in a Michelin star restaurant. It's just like it's awful because it just taints the whole experience in one particular way. You go like really hard work. And anyway, I worked there, but I didn't last very long because I thought, like, it's just too much. And so I think I worked there for about 3 or 4 months. Part of it unpaid at the very beginning, and then I started working when I finished my studies. I did like proper like paid work, and then I had a bit of a crisis because I thought, like, I'm not really enjoying this. You know, this is not for me. You know, I remember like going and also it was hard because I was dropped into the deep end. Like the chef would tell me, go make like he wanted to make like a lobster bisque. You know, like and there were lobsters. And in the walk-in fridge, and there was the pot, and that's all I was given. You know, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was just like, it was hard. So I had this moment of like crisis, and I thought, like, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I do. Maybe my dad was right. Maybe, you know, I should build on what I've done so far, and not what I'm doing now. And then I stuck to it, and I think I was really lucky. Actually, I was looking for a job in somewhere slightly less stressful. So I went to speak to Sally Clark, who was running a restaurant in Kensington. And I don't know why, I thought I'd gonna get a job there. It looked like a nice restaurant. More like old.
It actually feels logical now that you sort of say that, knowing kind of the way that the ethos of that business is. That feels like a really good fit.
It felt really good, and also she was doing this Californian food thing that it was more vegetable focused and felt close to what I feel naturally I gravitate towards. Like that whole kind of like really French Michelin thing is not really my thing, and I realized that at that point. So I just thought I'll go for a job there. This is the kind of place that probably I would enjoy more. She didn't have a job, but she was really nice, and she took her time to sit with me and kind of give me some advice. And she sent me across the street to Rolly Lee at Kensington Place, which was another great restaurant, but of a different kind yet again, you know, really, really good soul food, but like modern British, I guess, meets France. And it was, because I had my pastry experience, he gave me a job in the pastry section, and I worked for him for a couple of years doing both pastries and like the main kitchen. And he personally taught me so many things, like how to make a summer pudding, You know, this was like, we're talking about the 90s, the 1990s, like, you know, like summer pudding or these kind of like soufflés, you know, with goat's cheese and like things that are for me like feel classics of that particular period. And that was, I really got a lot of confidence out of working with Rolly. He had all the time, he had good team, good chefs working with him, and I got a lot of like boost to my confidence working in his restaurants.
Did you always think at that time though, from starting out, that you always figured you would end up doing it for yourself rather than for somebody else, do you think?
Yeah, well, this is a funny thing. No, I didn't really think that. I didn't have the confidence to say, okay, I'll do it for myself. It took a couple of more kind of steps along the way. So I worked for Rolly in his restaurants, Kensington Place and Launceston Place, for a couple of years. And then I wanted to learn more about patisserie, like, because I was doing other bits, but pastry was the thing where I was feeling strong. So I got a job at Baker and Spice, which was a small kind of traiteur deli place in Knightsbridge that I felt I could learn a lot about viennoiserie, the art of kind of croissant and Danish making and things that I really wanted to do. I have a tiny stint for like literally a couple of weeks at Maison Blanc that I didn't really enjoy, and then I moved on to Baker and Spice. And there I started getting this notion that like running a small operation, I didn't know if it was going to be a takeout deli or a restaurant, is something that I could possibly do. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the people that I was working with, like my partners that ended up my business partners later on, because one of them was Noam, which is my ex-partner, you know, that we came to England together as a couple, and then he left. And when he came, after he did his degree, he left, and after a year he came back, and he had that kind of business mind. He said, like, we could do something together with your talent and experience, and with my business background, which is kind of quite cheeky, you know, like I didn't have tons of experience in the industry, but it was like 4 or 5 years of restaurants.
So what are you now? So you're sort of 30, 31?
Yeah, and this was 2002.
Yeah.
So 5 years after coming to London. And he said, like, we can do it. And then the other person is Sami Tamimi, who was working with me at Baker and Spice, and he's the third. At that point, now we're more, but at that point it was the three of us, and he's also from Jerusalem. He's Palestinian, so we had a lot of things in common in terms of the palate and how we see food and how we experience. You know, our background was really kind of similar in some ways. And he also worked at Baker and Spice, cooking amazing food. You know, not necessarily Palestinian food, but food inspired by his journeys. You know, again, a lot of vegetables, a lot of fresh and heavy use of herbs and citrus and garlic, and, you know, there's chilies with strong flavors. And together, the three of us kind of started the Ottolenghi deli that we started in 2002 in Notting Hill. So it was, and like your question was whether I knew. I never knew, but it's like one thing led to another. I never had a plan. But with our different talents and backgrounds, the three of us managed to create a kind of a formula, an idea, which is that kind of really fresh food made every day for people. And also the presentation was very particular of that. It looks a little bit like a market in Jerusalem, but not with ingredients, rather with like cooked food, you know, that kind of building up, and, you know, beautiful platters and everything looking, you know, super sexy.
I remember going there, I can't remember when, and feeling that it was aside from the quality of what I ate, that there was something special about that whole thing, about the concept, about the idea, about the voice that it had.
Yeah.
I felt that it was unique and new.
Yeah, I think we didn't really know. It was so when we were the three of us had quite different backgrounds, but also I have a very good close friend, Alex, who's an architect, and he had a really clear visual language for this. And he said, like, you know, I want everything to be white. And it didn't feel very right for London at the time. You know, like, food is always associated with like the warmer materials. So, but he used Corian and like white backgrounds and like whitewashed walls. And he said, I want that kind of look. And people that came into our deli, they said, well, it feels like you're in Sydney or the Mediterranean or Greece, that kind of. But somehow he said that is the best background for your food. Alex said that. So from him and the three of us together working, that whole visual language came up. Again, without plan, nobody sat and said, what would be the right colors for this thing? We just kind of worked naturally. What do we want to cook? What do we want to bake? How we're going to present it? But we did spend a lot of time thinking about platters and heights and stands and flower arrangements, and it needed to look great. And the funny thing is, when it looked great, we also sold a lot of food. So it was kind of our business success rested on the visuals and that visual language that
Were you busy from the start?
We were really busy from the start. I remember this first or second Saturday, we were so overwhelmed because we were such amateurs. We had no idea what we were doing. Literally, we never owned a business. We never ran a business. It was all a lot of, try by error. And we had also the people that we hired to work were inexperienced Aussies that we put an ad in Gumtree. Everything feels so old now, but and a bunch of girls from Sydney and Byron Bay arrive, in their sandals, said we'll run this deli for you. Okay, that's fine. Do you have any experience? Yeah, we ran a beach shack and we're there, and it's a Saturday morning, and people are queuing around the corner. We can't make enough food, and we're not really prepared for this, and it's it was incredible. It was really you can imagine a rush of adrenaline, but also we need to do something it's just not working. And that we kind of, over the years, we learned the hard way how important service is and getting ready and being prepared and all that kind of.
It is funny, isn't it? Because in a different way, but with a similarity. When I opened Greens in 1990, we were the same. We had no idea really what we were doing. We knew what we wanted to do, but we didn't know how to run a business. And we were constantly. I'd go to market every morning at 5 o'clock, and I'd buy fresh produce on the day, and I'd learn about produce, and then we'd cook stuff. And then quite often in the afternoon, we'd go, we've run out of everything, and we're open for service, and kind of in a few hours, and then you end up going to a supermarket and kind of buying what you couldn't think, we're making no money out of this because we're just having to buy things at resale prices.
I think a lot of chefs go through this when they set up a business with their own or someone else's. That kind of it's all about the food, and you are really ignorant of the other side of the business. And now a few decades on, I understand how important it is to have the right environment, the right business plan, the idea of what am I going to sell, how much of it, etc. So you have less of these kind of nasty surprises when you ride out of everything, but before you even start. But I guess it's an age thing as well. We were relatively young, and you just make mistakes, don't you? That's
and you almost kind of accept it. You go, okay, you're doing about the seat of your pants, and you're just excited when you see that queue and the feedback that you get. What kind of things were you making then that have still sort of remained with you?
Kind of almost everything. So in a way, that idea that you make very vegetable heavy platters of wonderfully roasted, butternut squash with a dressing or a salsa or a sprinkle, or those things that people associate with our kind of food. A salad of whole grains with nuts or a particular pickle that goes in that kind of breaks through. All those things are still very much on the menu. The details change a bit, but the idea is there. And then
it's funny because you mention that, and all of those things now everyone goes, yeah, I know what those are. But you were at the forefront of that. Nobody was really doing that in the UK market for sure.
Well, I think that is something that I can say now that we kind of invented in some ways. Again, without planning. It wasn't what are we going to do? But in some ways, we were always informed by the customers, which is incredible. As a retailer or as a restaurateur, you always have this kind of incredible. You can tip into people's psyches through what they do, through their eating habits. And I remember, we couldn't just cut enough aubergine slices and grill them and come up with the salsa verde to go with, or whatever herb for people to buy. So in some ways, yes, we were there. We were creating a blueprint for something, but the customers always informed this process. We have this char grilled broccoli with chili and garlic. We have had it from day one, and we still have it on the menu now, 20 years this year. And people just love that way of preparation of broccoli. It's like the antidote to the way they've eaten broccoli growing up,
Exactly,
overcooked, looking grey and drabby and horrible, right? Like, so that is, just keeps all the freshness in, and it's got that like that chili and lemon and garlicky flavor. That's delicious. So in a way, those are still there. And same applies for the other side, which is the naughty side, the pastry counter, with the freshly baked cakes and tarts and like the treats. And I always like to say that these kind of mirror each other. You have something good and something which is also really, really good. And I hate it when people say, sweets or desserts are bad. It's just like what you do with them. So we always, and it's still my passion, that pastry counter with freshly baked sponges and coconut macaroons and chocolate chip cookies and whatever it is that we do, in the brownies that we have with the hazelnut and janjuja. So all these things are, again, they're just kind of still there, but just maybe different flavors. And
when did you start getting national recognition? Because you started writing for The Guardian in 2006.
Yeah. That's where it started. So in a way, so after we opened Notting Hill, we opened in Islington on Upper Street, and the Guardian office was just down the road in Farringdon from Upper Street, and the Guardian journalists or editors used to come for their lunches up to eat our food, and they realized that there's something interesting going on with vegetables, so they asked me to write a vegetarian column for The Guardian. And with that came more and more recognition, step by step, because in some ways there was a tiny column, it was literally a column, 1/4 of a page, and there was no image. It was literally just like, there's fattoush salad, Palestinian salad with bread and tomatoes, and it was a recipe. But it grew, and then in 2008 we had our cookbook. The Ottolenghi cookbook came out, and that had a much wider audience, and it was translated to other languages, and it became a thing, that has become. So I would say from 2008, when the book was published onwards, it has started growing quite rapidly.
I mean, the book sold over, for your first book, you sold over 100,000 copies initially, and it's probably far, far more now than when you started.
Yeah.
But it did, almost everything that you were doing, suddenly, like you say, it gained a wider audience. And there's something about that combination of flavours that you do, which, yes, I know there's a history with it, but there's something extra. You do something.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that people always say, because people always credit Sammy and me for like introducing the British and other, audiences in the Western world to Middle Eastern ingredients and dishes, and I always say that is just not true, So Claudia Roden wrote her Middle Eastern cookbook in 1968, which was the year Sammy and I were born. There's this, it's all there. That book, it actually got a release again now, 50 years plus on. And it's an incredible book because it's got all the classical dishes of Palestinian cooking, Lebanese, North African, etc. It's a very comprehensive book, but I think it hasn't reached the audiences that we reached. And I think one of the reasons why we did is because we slightly modernize the dishes. Modernize is not the right word, because some dishes don't need hummus as hummus, but a lot of it is like a certain degree of tinkering in how you choose to present the food. So
the style, the whole kind of message, the whole voice of it was about kind of, this is now. That's what it felt like.
And it's playful. So you can take a hummus and you can like zhuzh up the topping and make it look more like exciting, but also we didn't really do traditional dishes up until like when we published Jerusalem, the cookbook, which was kind of a few years later. It's just the use of the ingredients, tahini and za'atar and preserved lemons and or orange blossom water and a bunch of things that were key in different kind of Middle Eastern cuisines. We use them creatively in different ways. So we kind of like, we thought, okay, so that needs to, let's just take it out of its particular space and bring it to things that are more accessible. And I think in the world we live in now, the visuals are so clear because we all follow this different social media that are proponents of this kind of visual attitude to food, but that's the difference is that we brought that visual attitude like a bit earlier, like 10 or 15 years ago.
It's I think that it felt lifestyle as well as food. That kind of crossover from, like you say, from Cookery Road book, which is fantastic, but it felt like this is a cookery book. Yours felt an aspirational piece of work.
In a way, also people aspire to eat more vegetables, which I think was a key moment also. So it's this kind of perfect storm of like wanting to eat more vegetables. I mean, I'm not talking about turning vegetarian, I'm talking about like literally introducing a lot of more vegetables into your diet, plus then notion that there's a lot to learn in Middle East from the Middle East that we have already learned from maybe Italy and Greece and North Africa, but we are ready for some people are ready to expose themselves to that part of the world. And I think the Middle Eastern ingredients are really incredibly good when it comes to cooking vegetables and cooking with vegetables. So there's nothing like a yogurt sauce to go with a mejadra, which is rice with lentils and fried onion. I mean, that yogurt sauce just makes it. And so if you cooking with yogurt or using yogurt as a condiment, which we do a lot, is something people maybe have not known. They always thought the yogurt is just a fruity thing that you have with your breakfast. That is something. So you bring those two things together, the ingredients plus the vegetables, and that was very powerful, I think.
Yeah. But when you develop food now, because every time I've kind of worked with you, every time you've kind of come on to Sunday Brunch and you've cooked, you constantly just blow my mind with a little twist of an ingredient where you'll put something, I mean, but maybe even more so in your sweet dishes, that there's a little twist on there. Has that always been there?
It's become a little, it has always been there in the sense that since I published Plenty, which is my first vegetable cookbook, and till now, I think one of the things that I realized about vegetables is like, there's this kind of idea that if you eat vegetables, you give up something, right? Like you give up something that meat has, which is also true in reality. Meat has a certain flavors that you just can't get with vegetables and textures that are just not there. So you need to put a little bit of extra work when you work with the vegetables to make them as exciting and as compelling to people who are to meat eaters or even to not meat eaters. And so I always find I need to infuse my vegetables with something else, something different. And often, and that's true but that has become part of the Ottolenghi kind of like signature thing, is that there's a twist, there's something slightly different that just makes it feel a little bit more special. And sometimes for me, that is the thing, that's the holy grail for a recipe. So when we are in my test kitchen, I've got a team working and we try something out and we go, that's really good, but it's missing out that little twist at the end, like what are we going to do to make it feel a little bit more? And often, and the challenge is that it doesn't feel like gratuitous. It doesn't feel like it's unnecessary.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's not doing it for effect. It's doing it because
it makes sense. Like with fusion food, in the bad sense of it, that like as we remember it from like 20 years ago, it was always about like trying really hard to make things meat, which are not necessarily destined to meat. And if you do it badly, then it just doesn't work. You thought like, he's an idiot, she's an idiot. Like, why have they done it this way? Because it's like that pasta dish did not need the seaweed. Like what? Why? So in some ways, you need to be super sensitive to your ingredients and think, oh, that makes sense and that doesn't make sense. So I spend a lot of my time doing these calls when that twist is necessary and useful and when it's not. But that's something that's very hard to break into, like why it works and why it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes.
Trauma in the mouth is an expression that you use, which I think which absolutely sums up your food brilliantly. I think you're also the only person who we've ever had on Grilling whose name has actually become a verb. I think to Ottolenghi has almost become something that people kind of refer to in terms of how they cook these days.
I know, it's funny. I use it myself, to do Ottolenghi to Ottolenghi, which is weird because it's my name. But Yeah, I think it's a food language that people understand. Sometimes I look and it makes me chuckle when I see like catering companies do like menu styles. Oh, we can do Japanese and we can do Southern Italians in Ottolenghi style and this and that. I really really but what? Yeah. And it's but it's very flattering, you know. I never take it like for granted, you know. It's like it's a great feeling to have that people recognize something that has become a thing, you know.
Oh, big time. I've got one more thing that I want you to do for me. So we ask all of our guests, so you're going to take me, you can take me anywhere in the world to eat, right? It doesn't have to be posh, it could be a market stall, it could be anything. Somewhere that if you and I now were going to get in a car, get in a plane, get on a boat, whatever, where are we going to go and what are we going to eat?
That sets the bar really high, because if you can take an airplane, then you know I'll go to this place in Mallorca where I was like traveling, and there's this restaurant on a cliff, and you had the really delicious paella, I would say. But I would just take you actually in London, because I live in Camden, and around the corner from where I live on Parkway, there's this falafel place called Round Falafel. And it's run by two Lebanese guys, and it's just like a hole in the wall. If you've ever imagined a hole in the wall, that is a hole in the wall. It's like 70 centimeters wide and like 2 meters deep, you know. And they just make falafel. And there may be some fried halloumi and chicken, but they do these wraps, and they just start frying the falafel only when you order your pita pocket. You know, it never sits there because it has to be freshly fried. That's just like the rule of the game, both in the Middle East and obviously with them. And there's like chopped up salads, some pickles, some tahini and chili sauce, and they make it for you. And it's heavenly. And I go there like at least twice a week. Because it's like I come home sometimes in the middle of the day, 1 o'clock. I go like, what am I going to do? What am I going to eat that I really want to eat? And that's just also really healthy. And then I go to the guys and they make it.
If you get a twice a week, that's a recommendation, right? We're going. Next time I'm in London and I'm near you, then you and I.
Yeah, you come over and I'll take you.
Definitely. Also, mate, it's always a joy to see you. You know, I feel like I've only sort of touched the surface on the many things I want to ask you, but, you know, it's just been brilliant having you on. And, you know, thank you so much.
Lovely conversation.
Keep doing what you're doing, because it's amazing.
Thank you.